History Project. I'm Carol Pohl from the Sociology Department, and I'll be conducting the interview. Our camera work is being done by Terry Codigan. Okay, and I'd like to turn it over to our person who's going to be telling us the oral history, and Pete Scotese, and if you could tell us, Scotese,
Yeah.
you could tell us a little.
All right, my name is Pete Scotese. I'm chairman of the Board of Trustees of the Fashion Institute of Technology. I've been on the board since 1970 and chairman for about the past 12 years. I was appointed by the Board of Education, which has the right to appoint 5 members of the board, because as you know, we are a SUNY system college, but with a community college as well. Therefore, we are supported both by the state of New York and the local community, which in this case is through the Board of Education. I'm in my third 9-year term, and I believe I was probably appointed to the board to replace John Brooks, who was president of Celanese Corporation, because the board wished to have someone with textile manufacturing experience, and I had just come aboard Springs Industries as its chief executive officer. And I also believe that Harold Krensky, formerly CEO of Bloomingdale's and vice chairman of Federated, had a hand in my appointment because he was on the board at that time. At the time I came on the board, you might be interested in knowing who some of the other board members were. Andrew Goodman, who's, as you know, was recently deceased and served a total of 37 years on the board, and who founded our buying and merchandising course through his generosity. Helen Lefkowitz, who was the wife of Louis Lefkowitz, who was the state's attorney general for many, many years. Helen was a terrific board member. David Schwartz, who was the CEO of Jonathan Logan, the very famous dress warehouse. Emily Wilkins, who many of you may remember from the cosmetic industry, who also was an expert on healthy living, spas, and related subject matter. The union member at that time was Louis Stolberg, and our chairman was David Zelinka from the coat and suit industry. At any rate, at that time, the college was going through some problems in that the then president was ill, and Shirley Goodman was named executive vice president of the college and actually functioned as the president in a holding pattern while the board, through a board committee, recruited. And that is the time frame in which Marvin Feldman was recruited, and I believe he came on board about 1971 or in that arena. He came out of the Ford Foundation. He had worked in Washington, and it was a somewhat unlikely choice in terms of his educational background. But he was a high energy, imaginative, puppy dog type of individual who was relentless in his setting up goals and achieving. I worked very closely with Marvin, and I must say modestly that I was a very proactive director and took my job very seriously, and counseled with Marvin during his entire early internship and subsequent role, which was rather monumental because the changes which he induced, I think that's the word, were also monumental. And I had the good fortune, unfortunately, of being very much a part of his life in the last year and a half when he suffered and eventually died of cancer. So I suppose it would be inappropriate if I didn't give Dr. Feldman enormous credit for the dynamic growth from somewhat over 2,000 students to 12,000 students to the instigation of degrees beyond the associate degree, although I must say that both David Zelenka and Shirley Goodman were very, very instrumental with Governor Rockefeller, and I had a small part in getting our master's degree programs. The Educational Foundation for the Fashion Industries, which was incorporated before FIT, played an important complementary role with the college. First of all, it provided most of our scholarship funds, and still does in an increasing fashion. As time went on and the need for a dormitory became apparent, or rather another dormitory, the foundation also guaranteed our bond issue and are instrumental in helping us to develop new courses, course material, and play a role through their committees that's quite an actionable role with regard to FIT. That role and the liaison between the foundation and the school has grown materially in recent years since Shirley Goodman's demise and Richard Strider's position of director of the foundation. We have a much more proactive foundation because the need for funds has grown substantially. I think what impressed me most about the school is that it reminded me a great deal of my department store experience with Federated when I was chairman of the Boston store in Milwaukee. The kinds of events and the breadth of activities in a department store can be significant. I found that the same type of environment exists at FIT. And part of that, I think, comes from the fact that it's located in the greatest city in the world, and so that the learning experience is accelerated with all of our students, because just living here is a learning experience. I think the other part of it is that the museum at FIT, the Shirley Goodman Resource Center, is really one of our crown jewels, and the types of boutique-like exhibitions that they have are singular when you consider the potpourri of offerings in museums around the city. The art of Lesage, for instance, the history of the plaid, the retrospectives and with the fashion designers, the uniqueness of the jewelry design exhibits, the most recent one currently going on in recyclables, are really the kind of informational exhibits that are not only unique but are really unattainable or not readily available anywhere in the country, possibly in the world. I believe our costume collection is another crown jewel, which not only gives access to everything in the 20th century, from the early 20th century in costume, but it also enhances the image we have externally and is used significantly by external groups, as is our fabric collection, which I believe to be one of the largest and most unique anywhere. So the combinations of, it seems to me, of the Activities Educational Foundation, the museum, the costume collection, fabric collection, and the City of New York enhance the environment that our students live and study in to a significant degree. The other unique features of FIT, as far as I'm concerned, is the fact that we do have a very high retention rate, which I attribute largely to the fact that our students are serious students who are studying for a vocation and who know that we have the ability to place most of them in jobs after they attain their degree. A great part of that reason is the fact that our relationships with industry are unique. Industry guides us through the foundation and otherwise in the kind of courses that would be on the leading edge of need some years out or prospectively. I think the best illustration of that is the toy industry coming to us and funding up front a toy design course because the need for toy designers is so great and is being unattended. So that relationship is unique. The other reason I think we're unique in the learning process is that the adjunct professors frequently are people who are practicing the vocations that they teach, and we have the comfort of being on the leading edge of what's happening in an industry when our students are being taught, so that the obsolescence factor in terms of course content is probably not very high. We've always had a dedicated faculty, and I remember Marvin Feldman saying that this institution can go on with or without me because the faculty will carry on and they'll see that the job gets done. So I think that has been significant. In almost, I guess, in my whole tenure, I sense the degree to which the staff and faculty are dedicated. It's, I think they have a great belief in the institution, what it stands for, the product it turns out, and they're very, very pleased to be a part of it. I didn't mention it, but I think our auditorium is another great source of added environment, because we're able to bring in leaders in the industry or leaders in whatever course content we teach who have the opportunity or give the opportunity to our students of meeting the top professionals in almost every area. One of the undiscovered courses that we teach, of course, is interior design, and I understand that we rank in the forefront of interior design, and yet I meet many, many people who are unaware that we teach the course. matter of fact, I'm told we rank at or ahead of Yale, which is considered to be the number one college in the country teaching this subject matter. Part of the problem, not problem, but opportunity that we have going into our 50th anniversary, it seems to me, is to get the public at large to understand fashions to the technology a lot better. Because I have the sense that the departments are somewhat balkanized within the school, that those of us even on the Board of Trustees or on the Educational Foundation Board, and even in the staff and the administration, are not always as aware of the multitude of offerings we have at FIT. And I have a feeling that even though we are pretty full in terms of student population, that we do not have the as widespread recognition as we deserve. I consider the school a crown jewel of the city of New York, one of its great assets, and I think that story has to be told a little bit better. And perhaps this anniversary opportunity affords that or permits that. As far as the Board of Trustees are concerned, we are far more proactive than we used to be. The appointments that have been made in the past have been largely political appointments, where the individuals who served on the board were not necessarily proactive, because the need for fundraising and other activities was not as pregnant as it is right now. Secondly, the president of the institution did not have the clout with the governor and with the Board of Education to steer the right kind of talent onto the board because of the political nature of those appointments. The terms are still very long. They're elected for 9-year or appointed for 9-year terms, which seems to me to be awfully long if you want to get some degree of turnover. But happily, in more recent appointments, the school has been able to exert influence with both the governor's office and the Board of Education to steer prospects to the Board of Trustees that not only would become more proactive, but who bring talents and experience that we might not otherwise have. For instance, currently we have Dolores Wharton, whose background, along with her husband, Clifford Wharton, is in the educational field from the University of Michigan. She and her husband traveled around the world on behalf of the Ford Foundation. Her husband was Chancellor of SUNY and head of TIAA CREP. Abe Schrader, who had one of the most successful dress and garment manufacturing operations in the country. Johnny Pomerantz of Leslie Fay, whose family and who personally has given more funds to the school than all of the trustees, as a matter of fact, put together. Jay Mazer of the ILGWU, the recent successor to Sol Chaikin. George Kaufman in the real estate business. We feel today we are in need of good advice on in real estate transactions. Unfortunately, Andy Goodman died, but we were fortunate in getting another woman, Andrea Jung, who came out of both Neiman Marcus and Bergdorf Goodman. and who is now head of Avon Products North America. She speaks several Chinese dialects, is young and energetic. Jeffrey Banks, a menswear designer who's been a proactive director and very helpful. And more recently, the chairperson of the New York City Board of Education, Carol Gresser, who replaced Joe Barkin, who used to be on the board some years back. So I feel that we have the best board we've ever had in my experience with FIT. And I find that with some changes at the foundation that we will be restructuring that board to bring on its board of directors a mix of talents that can give even more focus and help and proactivity to the school. So prospectively, I'm looking for the new president, Alan Hirschfield, to bring the school into the 21st century in a significant way. He has an apparent, an obvious love for the students, for their seriousness. He spends a lot of time communicating with them. He's acutely aware and very persistent on getting us technology through his concept of a leading edge fund, because he feels that the computer and the computer age will drive most or all of our courses prospectively, and he's taken some giant steps in that direction. I think in that respect we're fortunate to have someone with his emphasis. Personally, I've never been more optimistic about FIT's future in spite of the financial squeeze that's currently going on, because I think that that squeeze is being addressed, and I think as we get more and more of our constituencies aware of how important this school is, that it will not be given second-class treatment in any respect, including financially. I'm about blown out here, Carol. Would you like to ask some questions?
Can I ask you, who are our constituencies? Who do you see are our constituencies?
Well, when I say constituents, I'm talking about the State University of New York, the City of New York, the Board of Education. We now have students, as you know, from over 60 countries, so we've got to get the messages to them. I see that happening as much through the Alumni Association as otherwise. Our other constituencies are those counties who send their students from the 5 boroughs into the school, because they support us also. And so, and the public at large, because we will have more need for capital campaigns, and in that respect we'll probably very soon start a development program under the president to raise larger sums for specific projects where the budget simply doesn't exist. Does that answer your question pretty well? Okay.
Could I ask some follow-up questions to some things you touched upon? Like the role of industry in shaping FIT.
Mm-hmm.
You mentioned Andrew Goodman.
Yes.
Could you tell a little about him and the role he played?
Yes, and Andrew Goodman started the buying and merchandising course and actually established a chair, although the chair was really more in name than as a matter of fact, and it was really a tribute to his father, who had started the store, the Goodman store.
That's Bergdorf Goodman.
Bergdorf Goodman, yes. And over the years, I think last year we graduated about 550 students in buying and merchandising, and I would say that we probably graduated more than 12,000 students in buying and merchandising. That's the kind of input that we get from industry, where either directly or indirectly, where a course gets established for a future need. Now that's kind of old hat. There's a lot of buying and merchandising courses now. Not a lot, but that's not on the leading edge of need out there, because there are other places where people get, or students can get buying and merchandising experience. But the fact is that because of our close relationship with retailers in this city, we are able to give our students opportunities like internships and job placement that's rather unique. As a matter of fact, most of the dinner dances to raise funds each year have honored retailers or retail establishments. The most recent one being Bergdorf Goodman. But in the past, we've honored, as you know, Saks Fifth Avenue, Macy's, Dillard's Department Store, and others. The Fragrance Foundation. These are all industries that we relate to very closely through the foundation. Although we're getting our
Could you explain
professors to be more proactive with industry groups covering the subject matter which they teach. I think Nina Curtis has a very close relationship with people in industry who would be normal employers of the business and technology classes that are taught under her umbrella. Does that
Yeah,
do you want me to
and
amplify?
The foundation, yeah, the foundation initiated programs, mentioned toy design.
Well, they have recommended, the foundation has a committee that recommends to us or passes judgment on courses as to, in terms of whether or not we should do them, what the success factor might be, what the need is out there. Now, I'm not sure this came from the foundation, but I think we had a recent inquiry from the Fur Group, Fur Association. They want us to reinstate a fur design course. That'll be fun. I mean, it's a very controversial issue. Now, what do we do? Should we or shouldn't we? And they don't want it, if we do it, they don't want us to call it another name. So here we are perplexed by the knowledge that fur design is incoming, that the interest in fur is growing, fur products, that the industry surrounds us there. We're in the fur district, that they've been very supportive for many, many years. And they now come to us and say it's about time to start a fur design course, and they're saying, you know, it will be successful in terms of internships, jobs, etc. And we have to ask ourselves, do we want to go through any of the convulsions that might be associated with the proactive or the activists who are opposed to furs, you know, killing animals for use in coats or other kinds of items.
Do they provide the funding for the program? Is it?
They provide scholarship funds. They give us, sometimes it depends. If it's a brand new course, in the case of the toy industry, I think they gave us $130,000 up front to get started, to get airborne. And then they support us right along with internships and jobs. I mean, that's really the way it works. Sometimes they fund either small or large doses, and then once they get going and we get going with them, we not only deal with the individual toy manufacturers, but with the association. And that gives us a continuing relationship for scholarship funds and internships and jobs. So our thrust is not as a vocational school. I hate to use that word anymore because it's getting so technical. I mean, the courses we teach are not run-of-the-mill vocational. They're career education courses. We're a career education institution, and what we teach is being driven more and more by technology, and it's requiring more and more skills. And so I like to think of us in those terms as being kind of the core of the institution. And then the masters, the baccalaureate degrees in science and arts and the master's degrees are, I don't like to use the word icing on the cake, maybe the master's is, but certainly the baccalaureate is. Because we say now that you've got your 2-year associate degree, go for it. Go for the fine arts, and go for the liberal arts, and let's move on.
Okay. Could I ask you some other questions?
Sure.
About, in light of your specialization, my understanding of FIT was founded by a few families, like the Haft families, that wanted a place to get people to come into their industries.
I'm not as, I gave you some material on that. The way I hear it is that the industrial high school early on needed people trained for the sewing industry to support the apparel production that was growing and was the largest single employer in the city of New York. And that they asked us, as a matter of fact, the school was in the industrial high school, and we trained people to sew for the garment industry. I think the next, and I'm not sure that, but I believe the very next course that we taught was pattern making, very allied to that. And then it went on from there. So I'm not as familiar with its early history other than that's the way it grew.
Well, one of the reasons I asked the question is my understanding is the families needed somebody to continue their industries. And one of your area of specialization that you've worked in is with family businesses.
Yes.
Have you sensed that FIT has been shaped by a series of families? Like you mentioned the Goodman family that have taken interest in FIT.
I don't think they dominated. I think they helped to shape it, but no, I have no feeling that it was shaped by a particular family. It was shaped by an industry, the apparel industry. And by the way, in that connection, again, looking into the 21st century, one of the great opportunities that I see for the school is projecting itself into the home fashions business, the home furnishings business. People, when we say Fashion Institute, they think of apparel fashion or fashion design. The fact is that home furnishings is burgeoning and exploding at a faster rate than apparel when it comes to design. And also, there is no longer a fine line between apparel, fashion design apparel, and fashion design home fashions. They're blurred. And the proof of that is you take someone like Bill Blass. Bill Blass, my former company, Springs, used Bill Blass to design home fashions, and that's been going on for 18 years. And Bill is well known in the haute couture and apparel design. So they're crossing over. There's a blur there, and our school has not established the reputation. Part of the reason is the balkanization of the departments. We should be putting interior design, design home furnishings, buying and merchandising, a lot of those things collectively together, and having a home fashions thrust that has as much visibility as our fashion design thrust. And that's our opportunity, because the home fashions industry is terribly fragmented, not nearly as sensitive to imports as is apparel, and design is getting into every corner of the bedroom, the bath, and the kitchen, from pot holders to bed linens. So there's an enormous opportunity which I sense. And also the focus is on the home going forward into the 21st century. You know, we're going to be driven to stay home by the electronics. You know, big screen, this PCs and faxes and everything else. You know, you're going to have home centers that are going to keep people couch potatoes, and all those needs have to be filled. You know, when you think of one item, windows, and how many of there are, I don't know, there's got to be billions of windows, right? They need to be treated in some fashion. Design. I mean, if you just took windows alone, the opportunities to create something for windows is enormous. So, you know, and people can go into that business. I don't know if you know, but I speak about once a year to these students that are from each of the classes that, I guess there's a special group they're doing while they collect them, different people speak to them. I speak to them on the opportunities in home fashions. Because if somebody just invents a better pot holder, or a better something else, they can establish themselves in that business with very low capital cost or inventory cost, and with no plant or equipment because they can have it made somewhere else. So the opportunities in home fashions are endless, and that's I personally would like to see that happen before I let go at FIT. Does that make any sense, Carol? That arena?
Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely.
I've just got to get enough people hit their hot button on it to get it going.
Could I touch upon another theme also? You know, I know from reading your biography and hearing, you received the Horatio Alger.
Mm-hmm.
It appears that FIT has been a tremendous avenue for upward mobility for students, even for faculty.
Mm-hmm.
Has that been your experience, that FIT has been one of these arenas where people have, you know, come from, quote, humble backgrounds? And
I think our students have really had remarkable careers, and some of them in a relatively short period of time. What impresses me is in the old world that I lived in, you worked for 20 or 30 or 40 years to get there. But today, and part of it's because a lot of the stuff we teach is creativity. The opportunities are much closer by, the opportunity to succeed. And when I say succeed, is to grow a business, or to grow in your your career. You can grow a lot faster in the creative fields, and I think that's why I'm amazed at the speed with which some of our students are able to get into business and be successful. That's why the president wants to start. In a new building, we want to fund the young entrepreneurs, our students, and take a piece of the action and give them the opportunity to use all of our facilities at the school to help them grow the business, to start the business and grow it. It's an incubator. He's talked to you about it, I'm sure you've heard of it. That concept is a good concept. Now the Horatio Alger thing is, it's a little broader based than that, in the sense that that Norman Vincent Peale, who started the whole notion of Horatio Alger, was trying to say that in America, no matter what your background or how humble your beginning, that the opportunity to be highly successful is there. Now they say only in America, as though there's no opportunity anywhere else. But my own view is that probably it's the greatest country in the world for someone of humble beginnings to be successful. I don't think there's any other country like it, because that's our heritage. And I think one of the things that might save this country economically long term, with some of the industries disappearing or going overseas, is the entrepreneurial spirit, and the fact that we're starting tens of thousands of new businesses every year that are successful, and it's because we have a climate that allows that to happen. Look at these silly TV. What's the characters where they're in short supply? Terry, you ought to know.
Simpsons.
What's the name of the?
Oh, Bart Simpson. Oh, Simpsons.
Yeah, right. I mean, you can't even buy them. I mean, who heard of them a couple of years ago? That's an exaggerated, for instance. But there are lots of, whether it's a hula hoop or that, or some new type of design, or the Springs was the first company to employ a fashion designer in home furnishings. It was Emilio Pucci in the early 1950s. It was the first time ever that a apparel designer designed for home fashions. That was considered below the dignity of an apparel fashion designer to design for a bed and bath. Now everybody's in it. And you've got people like Nicole Miller and others who just spread out like bandits, in covering a whole spectrum of home furnishings, like Ralph Lauren, Calvin Klein. Look at him; he's going to home furnishings for the first time with home innovation. So the opportunity is there. It's enormous.
Okay, we're winding down. Is there anything that you'd like to have included in the archival record of FIT that we haven't touched upon?
I don't think there's anything unique in its past that I'm, conscious of, except that it grew incrementally, it grew qualitatively. Institution, its non-curriculum facets grew along with it. In other words, we got more and more involvement with speakers in the auditoriums, shows at the museum, the extra features that gave a panache and broadened, the perspectives of the students. Because even today, if you were to make a list of all the events that are currently going on outside of the classroom, day and night, 7 days a week, virtually, it's pretty awesome. It would be impossible for the president of the institution, if he devoted 24 hours a day, to attend everything that's going on at FIT. And the professors and the industry and the staff make it happen. They're the ones that induce these and promote, these special occasions. So that that's an important part of what's going on and what has developed.
Okay. Thank you very
Good.
much.
Okay, I'm